back to the channel. So the garden has been producing and I've been bringing in produce every single day. Not as much as I hoped I would get this year, but I am getting stuff and I am putting stuff up. But one of the things that I'm getting a ton of is cucumbers. And so what I'm doing with all these cucumbers is canning pickles. And these are actually a pickling cucumber. So when you are planning on canning cucumbers into pickles or making pickles, you're going to definitely want a pickling variety. So you can find those anywhere. These are a Boston. I can't exactly remember what the variety is, but I will drop a link in the description. I got them from Baker's Seed Company. So I buy seeds from there. I also buy seeds from the Grateful Harvest Seed Company, and I'll drop both links in the description. That's where that supplies. Both those two places pretty much supply all of my seed needs for my gardens for fall and the summer. So let's talk about what size you need to be picking your cucumbers before canning them. So there's a lot of question out there on how to get, and a lot of tips out there on how to get crispy, crunchy pickles. And I've tried a lot of them, but the method I'm going to show you today is the one method that has actually worked. So a couple things to remember. You want to pick your cucumbers about this length. I have one that's this length. I'll probably still can it, but you want them just a little bit smaller than that. So this is a good length, or even this size. What we've been doing lately, which is what I'm going to can today, is picking them very, very small. And these smaller cucumbers make the perfect snack. So then you have zero prep work with them. You don't even have to slice these. We just can them whole, just like this, and then they're a perfect little cucumber to snack on. If you were going to spear them or slice them up into rounds, then you'd want them about this size. So a couple of things to get ready to go is picking them at the right size. If they get too big, you're just not going to get a good crunchy product. The other thing you want to do right from the get-go is you want to cut off the blossom end. So you have two different ends on your cucumbers. You have one end that is attached to your vine, and then you have the other end that is a blossom end, and that is where the flower forms as your cucumber is forming. And once it's dead, then you want to go ahead, once you harvest it, is to cut off the top. So you're just going to take a knife here, and you're going to, I'm going to get one of my smaller ones, take your blossom end, and all you need to do is just cut this little bit tip off. And that just removes that enzyme, and that helps them to stay nice and firm and stay crunchy in the canning process. Okay, so the first thing you're going to want to do is, or what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all my little cucumbers here and I'm going to go ahead and cut off the blossom ends, and then I'll meet you back here. Once you have all of your blossom ends cut off, no matter if you're using the small ones or the little bit larger ones that you can spear or slice up, you want to get them into a salt water brine and put them in your fridge. So this has been in my fridge for about a week, 7 days or so. And what's in here, I had it weighted down with a plate, and it's just a whole bunch of these little mini pickles. And what is in here is 2 gallons of water and 3/4 a cup of a good quality salt. So what I do is I take about I take about a quart of warm water, and then the salt. I make sure the salt really is dissolved, and I pour that in first, and then I add the remaining to get up to 2 gallons of water. Then I would go ahead and stick my pickles in, weigh it down with a plate, and stick it in my fridge out in the shop. That's just our extra fridge. Now, you can do these, they at least need to be in the saltwater brine overnight or up to 7 days. Now, the cool thing about this is you can put them in and then just add to them throughout the week until you have enough. What you're looking for is about 8 pounds of cucumbers, and that's what this recipe will cover once you get the other brine that you're going to go ahead and pickle them with. So if you don't have 8 pounds of cucumbers right off the get-go, go ahead and mix up your saltwater brine, stick what you do have in them after you've cut off the blossom ends, stick them in your fridge, and keep adding to it for up to 7 days. And once you have enough, then you're ready to start the canning process. Okay, so you are ready to can your pickles. What do? Well, if you notice over here, I do not have my lid on my water bath canner. That's because I am going to use a low pressurization method for canning the pickles. What this means is that I am going to bring my temperature up to 180 to 185 degrees, my water, and then I'm going to hold it there for 30 minutes. That is going to enable your cucumbers not to cook in boiling water, and then they won't get soft. So the first thing you need to do is make up your brine that you're going to pour over your cucumbers to make your pickles. So what I have here is just 8 cups of water. Then I'm going to go ahead and add 6 cups of vinegar, and this is just a 5% vinegar. You want to make sure that it is a white 5% vinegar. You don't want to use anything like apple cider vinegar or anything like that with a mother, because the acidity will change as it sits. So this is a pasteurized vinegar. You're going to add that to your pot. And then I have a half a cup of salt. This is a pickling salt, but you can use any good quality salt. A 1/4 cup of sugar. And then this is just my own homemade pickling spice. You want a tablespoon of pickling spice. You can buy it from the store, you can make your own. There's a ton online. The Ball Canning Cookbook has one in there, which is what I followed for this. And I just put it in this mesh tea bag here. You can use just a piece of cheesecloth and make a knot around it, whatever you want to do, but you just don't want the spice to go all in it, but you do want it to boil inside of it. Okay, so I'm going to stick this in here. I'm going to give this all a stir and turn it on so that it starts to come to a boil. Okay, so while my brine is coming to a boil, you want to kind of work quickly because you don't want your brine to boil out and keep going. So once it comes to a boil, I turn it down a little bit and just let it stay hot. What you're just looking for is all of your salt and your sugar and everything to be nice and dissolved in there. Okay, now in order to do this method, the easiest way is to have an electric canner. I don't have one. Maybe one day I will. The reason why that would be the easiest is because you literally set your temperature and then that's what it holds it at. So I'm showing you the more complicated way of doing it, which is with a water bath canner. So it can be done this way. I've done it multiple times, but electric canner, if you have one, would definitely be the easier way. If you don't have one, an electric canner, which even if you do have an electric canner, I would recommend using a thermometer just to make sure that everything is accurate and the way that it's supposed to be. So I'm just using my a candy thermometer here. I actually have a really good cheese thermometer from Roots and Harvest, but my clip had broken, so it doesn't clip onto the pot. This makes it much easier to clip onto my pot. So I'm going to go ahead and hook it now, and I want to get my water up to about 140 degrees. I have my pint-sized jars already washed and inside of the canner staying warm. And then I have my cool pickles back here, or I'm sorry, my cool cucumbers still in their brine back there. This is going, so that is good. And I'm going to go ahead and get the rest of my things. What you will need is some mustard seed, which I'm almost out of. You want either some dry dill or some fresh dill. My garden has been a real struggle this summer, and I had fresh dill, but the bugs ate all of it. So I am using some dry dill this time. You can use either or. And then you're going to want cloves of garlic. So those are the things you're going to need. Now, using your jar clamper, you're going to go ahead and take all of your jars out of your canner, and you want to work rather quickly at this point. Okay, so in each of my jars, I have went ahead and put 1 clove of garlic, and now I'm going and putting 1 teaspoon of dry dill weed into each jar. If you had fresh dill, you would just go ahead and put a sprig or 2 in each one. Now I'm going to put 1 teaspoon of mustard seed in each one. I am almost completely out, so I'm going a little bit less just so that I can make sure to give each of the jars a little bit of mustard seed. This is just for some flavor. Okay, now it is time to fill my jars with pickles. Or I keep saying pickles, that's what we're making. I fill them with cucumbers. So I'm going to go ahead and just take all my baby cucumbers. I am not slicing them or doing anything. And I am just going to get them in as tightly as I can. Once your jars are all filled, I'm just going to use my wide mouth funnel and I'm going to put the brine in. So you are looking for a 1-inch headspace. And an easy way to do your headspace is if you just go to the rim. 1 inch is about right here, and then this is about a 1/2 inch, and up here this one is about 1/4 inch. So that's kind of the easiest way to measure out your headspace when you're canning. Now you want to work a little bit quickly because you don't want your jars to cool down too much. Now you probably put in pretty cool pickles since they came straight from that brine in your fridge. So what I have found is that if my jars cool down too much by putting in the cool pickles or the cool cucumbers, I will fill my sink full of hot water, and then I will go ahead and stick my full jars in there just for a few minutes until they get warmed back up. Sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't. It just depends. If my pickles are really, really cold, that happens. But if they've sat out for a little bit while I'm making the brine and they're not super cold, the brine warms the jar, keeps the jars warm, and it's no big deal. You just don't want to put in a cold jar into your canner where your jars will crack. Okay, now I'm going to take the end of this little handy tool and I'm just going to stick it down the sides a little bit, as much as you can. Since I'm doing whole cucumbers, it is a little bit more challenging, but you're just trying to get out any air pockets whatsoever. That way you know your headspace is right. Keep them kind of packed if you can. And then I'm going to go ahead and wipe all my rims and put my lids and rings on. I have my clean dish towel here with a little bit of white vinegar on it, and I'm going to go ahead and wipe all of my rings, or all of the rims of my jars, and I can feel that my jars are still pretty warm, so I'll be okay sticking them in the canner. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and put my lids on. And then my rings. Careful not to burn yourself on your jars if they are warm. You just want your lids and your rings to be on fingertip tight. That means you're not going to crank them down. You're just twisting them until you get some resistance. And then we're going to go ahead and get these into the canner. I'm going to go ahead and get all of my jars in. Now my water at this point is about at 140 degrees, which is exactly where you want it to be as you're getting your jars in and set. Now there's no, because of this type of method, it's called the low pasteurization method, there is no adjustment for elevation. It is going to be the same no matter where you live, because you're using a completely different method. You're not just raising your water up to a boiling point and then doing it for a set amount of time based on your elevation. This is different. And so since you are holding this temp right at 180 degrees to 185 degrees, you don't need to adjust for elevation. It's just hold it there for 30 minutes. Now, if your temperature were to drop from that point of 180 to 185 degrees, you would have to start your timer over. So it's kind of the same standard as, you know, if your boiling water is no longer boiling, you need to start your timer over. It's the same thing with this method. If your heat goes below the 180, then you need to start it over. So basically you want it to hold there for 30 minutes on the dot. So I'm not going to put my lid on. I'm going to turn my stove up. I don't turn it up too high. I usually keep it right at like, I have an electric stove, so usually right at like 4 to 5. Because I don't, once you get to that point, you really don't want it to go, you know, you need to have control of it. And if it's too high, comes up too high, too fast, then it's really hard to bring it back down. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it up to about 4 right now, and I'm going to watch. I will not start my timer until I hit 180 degrees, and then I'll watch it very closely for 30 minutes and make sure that I keep it at that temperature. Okay, so we are right at 180 degrees. So I'm going to go ahead and start my timer for 30 minutes. And I am going to watch this very closely. So with this method, for these 30 minutes, don't walk away from your canner. You really want to watch it closely. If it drops below 180 degrees, I'll slightly turn it up. If it looks like it's going to get too hot above 185 degrees, I will slightly turn it down. But I'm moving my knob ever so slightly. I don't want to make any kind of big jumps or changes, but I just want to really try and hold it. Now again, if you had an electric canner, this would be a lot easier of a process. I don't, so it's very doable to do it with a water bath canner. That's how I've only done it. Maybe one day I'll have an electric canner, but just watch it closely. You do not want your water to boil. If it's boiling, you're going to cook your cucumbers, and that's how you get those mushy, not crispy pickles. So we are going to wait for our timer to go off, watching our gauge very closely so that it stays in that 180 to 185 degrees. Okay, so the timer has gone off, and we really had no problems keeping it 180 degrees. I had my electric stove on about 6, and it stayed at 180 the entire time, which was fantastic. So all I'm going to do now is just turn off my stove, and now you can gently pull out your jars. Now, what I have found with this method is it takes kind of a long time for these jars to seal. So you won't hear the pop right away, and actually they kind of look, a lot of times you can tell that they're not sealed yet. They typically won't seal inside the canner like when you do a normal water bath canning or pressure canning. I'll start hearing pops about a half an hour from now. Sometimes a little sooner, sometimes right when you get out, but what I'm finding is that they are not sealing until a lot later on. And I think a lot of that just has to do with it's just not at a high enough temperature that it's not sealing right there in the canner. So I'm going to go ahead and take the rest of these out, let them sit here on my counter overnight, let them seal undisturbed so that they can seal, because if you mess with them or touch them, you possibly won't get any seal. And then I will see you back here in the morning for our next steps. Okay, so these have been sitting here for just about 24 hours, and we're going to check the tops of them and make sure that they are sealed. So all you're going to do is push the top. If none of them snap back at you like a Snapples bottle, then they have properly sealed. Now, I was hearing pops about 45 minutes after I took them out of the canner, so it does take a lot longer, like I had said before. So don't get discouraged if you don't hear the pop. They really just need to sit undisturbed for a long time before they actually seal. So I'm going to go ahead and take all of my rings off once I know that they are sealed. And then I'm going to go ahead and wipe my jars so that they are completely clean. Once your jars are completely sealed, your rings no longer serve a purpose. So your rings are really just to keep your lids in place as they seal. Once they're cool and sealed, you don't need to store with your rings on. In fact, I recommend not doing that, because if for any reason, which has happened to me multiple times, your lids come unsealed, your rings will hold them into place, and that will give you an improper seal or a false seal, and you'll think that they are still sealed and they're not. So they could potentially seal and unseal depending on the temperature of your home if you have your rings on, and that could be very dangerous if you were unsure that that was happening with your rings on. So I always store without my rings on, and just for safety precautions, and that's what I always recommend. Whenever I show my canning shelves or my canning closet, I always get questions on that. Why don't you have your rings on? That is why, and I try and share that with every canning video that I do. Okay, so now that all of my jars are nice and clean, if they were sticky and gross, you could even run these under some cool water, not too hot, not too cold, and wash them that way if you needed to. But because they are sealed, you don't have to worry about that, not them coming unsealed when you wash them. Now I'm just going to write the contents, which is pickles and the year. I don't worry too much about the exact date as much as I want to know what year I canned all of my jars in. So that is all you have to do, and then they are ready for the shelf. So this makes the crispiest, crunchiest pickles. The only method I have used without having to add anything extra to your jar, but this actual low pasteurization method makes the best crunchy pickle. So go try it. Have a happy gardening season. See you next time.